Hey everyone, Simon here, and today I'm breaking almost every tool I own and at the end resanding already finished boards. But I think that the final effect was totally worth it, so let's get to it. I started by selecting two boards that would fit the project. I was looking for somewhat straight boards that weren't too capped or bowed and had a fairly good pattern for some end grain cutting boards. I then clamped those boards to my desk to hold them in place and used my track with a circular saw to cut off one of the edges. I did that to give myself a straight reference for a crosscut sled later on. The track I'm using here is from Wolfcraft. It's a pretty budget-friendly option and I've had it for a while now and had some opportunity to tinker with it, and it doesn't hold the saw perfectly in place, but it still leaves really nice clean and straight cuts. After that I measured how much wood I would need for each board, I marked that on the wood and cut the boards on the crosscut sled. After that I swapped my blade to a rigging plate, which I'm not sure if you can call it that because it's like 40 teeth, so it would be somewhere in the middle between like your 60 and 24 ones. But comparing it with my previous cuts with the grain, it made a huge difference, so yeah, with that let's get to ripping. And so I started cutting these boards into strips, but I kind of ran into my first issue, which you'll see in a second. Okay, so this is the next day, and the reason you didn't see this clip finished is because my table saw said it doesn't want to work no more. So I'm not really sure what's wrong with it yet, but it's probably a bad connection somewhere. So the way this works is this table saw works on 110 volt, and so I do have this transformer because I'm based in Europe and we have a 230 volt. And not really sure what's wrong with it yet and where it's, well, I guess not working, but I do have a friend coming over to hopefully help me figure this out. And in the meantime, what I think I'm gonna do is try to glue these things up, so I do have to run them on the jointer still. And like, this is a bummer because I just had this thing fixed, so it had a bearing go bad on it right here, and it's fixed now, so I didn't try to run anything through it yet, so I guess we'll see. I have something to do for now, so I'll try to do that at least. So yeah, this is where I am. Alright, so that was tool number one to break on this build, and to avoid wasting time I ran the strips on the jointer and glued the first boards. Back to the saw, I had a friend come over to check if the transformer was good, and it was fine, so I started cracking on the saw. I checked the switch and it was okay, so next I pulled the motor off and I found that the spring on one of the brushes was bent and wasn't pushing on the brush, that then didn't connect to the slip ring. So I straightened the spring and put the motor back on, and that was the fix. And turns out I didn't even have to pull the motor off because there are access points to the brushes, so I wasted a good few hours on that. Okay, so I got the saw fixed and now I'm just waiting for these two boards so I can pull them out of the clamps. And I have these two left, and I think that I'm not gonna try and make a square pattern and just cut them in stripes and flip them and glue them like that. Not quite sure how that's gonna work out because this bottom one is quite crooked, so I don't know, I think I will try it anyways and see how that goes. As you saw there in the video, the last two boards will still be end grain, but I won't be doing a square pattern, and actually the one board that was bent, I'm cutting the strips in half to save on the thickness, and it will have like a rectangular shape for like a breadboard or something like that. I then cut the boards I had glued up into strips, and then it was time to prepare them for the second glue up. And that, beside the sanding, was the most time-consuming part of this build. The process I'm using is extremely inefficient, but for me I found it to produce the best results. So what I'm doing is I'm using hot glue to attach the strips to a flat board, and I'm running it through a planer, and that gives me a really good flat surface for the glue up. So if the first glue up wasn't perfect or there are some lines of cured glue, this method usually saves on the thickness, but that being said, it takes me forever to do all the boards. So after spending a decade straightening the strips, I started glue up with the two boards that wouldn't have a square pattern, and with the first board I tried gluing, I've had just a small surprise. Whoops. Yeah, so I think that there is something wrong with this particular clamp, because it's the second time it broke on me in the exact same spot. So anyways, I glued up all the boards and it was time for flattening, and this time I bought a new router bit as the previous one blew apart in my last build. My last router bit left some visible straight lines that I couldn't sand off, and I thought that that happened because the bit was really dull. But it doesn't appear to be the only reason, as the new one did the same, and in the end I had to resand finished boards, but I'll get back to that in a moment. After flattening the boards, I went ahead and sanded them with 60 grit, and like you couldn't make this stuff up, my sander started acting up. And with this one, I'm not sure if it's the brushes or did the motor just burnt up. I will probably take it apart at some point to try and see what's wrong with it, but after it broke I just bought a new one, and this time I went with the DeWalt with variable speed. It just seemed like a good choice for the price. I then squared up all the boards and gave them a small round over, but not all of them got it. One got a bevel, because this happened. The bearing, like, I don't even know if you can call it a bearing, but anyway, it gave out on the round over bit, so I guess that the last board will just have a chamfer, because I didn't have a spare router bit at a time. So then I just sanded the boards up to 150 grit, not skipping any grits in between, and I thought that this time I wouldn't have any problems with those lines. And to be fair, they weren't as visible as the last time, but as you'll see on the last boards, you can still see them quite clearly. And at this point I should know better not to put finish on those boards, and shouldn't just hope that the lines would go away, but for some reason I did. But this time I didn't want to leave them like I did in my previous build, so I bought a belt sander for some more aggressive sanding, and I'm really happy I did because that fixed it and all the lines went away. And I won't bother with sanding this stuff again, but basically after the belt sander I went back to my Rotex sander and sanded from 80 to 150 grit, water popping in between each grit, and reapplied 2 coats of food safe hard wax oil. And with that, this is the final product. Looking back, I had some struggles with the tools, but I guess sometimes that is to be expected. And I'm super happy that I resanded the boards this time, because I have a solution for the next ones, and I'm really happy with how these ones turned out. With that, thank you to everyone watching, especially the ones that made it all the way to the end, and I will see you in the next one.